Get all your questions ready. He's a graduate of Brother Martin High School in UNO and was named sports director at WWL Television earlier this year after serving as the station's North Shore bureau chief for many years, and prior to that worked at WGNO Television for many years. So he's been in our midst for quite some time, done a great job, and he's a good guy. In fact, I remember him calling in on our show, on our radio show from Hoover, Alabama, when Curtis went over there and beat them, and he was reporting for us, helping us out that night, and did a great job at that, and does a great job with everything he does. Please give a warm welcome to Doug Mouton of WWL Channel 4.
All right, thanks, Ken. I'm starting to stopwatch on myself. You said 7 to 10 minutes. I tend to ramble, so in case I go too long. A couple things I want to say right off the bat. First of all, I saw Jabbar's car team play this year. I was at Jay's semifinal game this past Friday night. Two smart, disciplined, well-coached, extremely talented teams. These two guys do a terrific job. Great representatives of our area. Wish them both luck this weekend. JT I had the pleasure of working with for 10 years when I was at WGNO. I certainly believe in what he does. I think he does a spectacular job, as everybody in Louisiana football does. Congratulations to him. Kenny mentioned the game in Hoover. That was in 2006. That was actually my last day at WGNO. My last assignment was to go to Hoover to cover Curtis when Hoover was the #1 team in America, double-digit Division I recruits. They had their own TV show on MTV, and believe me, they believed every bit of their own hype. And JT went down there. Now he had Joe McKnight, who was probably the best player in America. But beyond that, this other team had 15 maybe Division I kids, and JT absolutely took them apart. And by the end of the game, they were defeated in every way a team can be defeated. I still believe that is the single best coached football game that I've ever seen. The way JT took Hoover apart. And this wasn't what I was supposed to talk about, but while we're on the subject of high school football, I've actually done high school football shows in 3 states. I think subdividing private and non-private, whatever you want to call it, I think that's the wrong idea. I think everybody plays high school football against each other and the winners win. I've seen states that subdivide. I think it's a bad idea. I think everybody plays. You play by enrollment. That's the way every state does it. I think it's the best way. What is funny, when I was in South Dakota, which was my first TV job, I went from New Orleans East to Rapid City, South Dakota, and actually I had an intern for Buddy Diliberto. Buddy Diliberto made the call to the sports director in South Dakota to recommend me, and the guy from South Dakota called me back and he said, I couldn't really understand much of what he was saying, but it all sounded good. So that was my recommendation. In South Dakota, actually, at the small schools, they play 9-man ball. And if you've ever seen football with less guys on the field, it is an amazing sport. My understanding is in Colorado, in the really small schools, they play 6-man ball. But in the 9-man ball, the final scores would be 72 to 66, because if you had one fast kid, it was so easy to isolate them that it would be a touchdown back and forth. Anyway, I wanted to say that about high school football. And then when Coach Baglio was talking, I'm supposed to talk about the Saints. I'm going to get there in a second. He mentioned LSU and the bowl conglomeration that kind of bit LSU in the BCS. The 6 terrific teams in the SEC this year, Alabama, Georgia, LSU, A&M, Florida, South Carolina, those 6, LSU was the only one of those 6 to have to play 4 games within that group. LSU went 2-2. Georgia and Alabama, ironically enough, were the only ones that only played 2 within that group before the SEC championship. And they were each 1-1 within the group. That'll tell you right there. Although that group, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in the bowl game. That group of 6, when not playing each other, right now is 55-0. Just, yeah, so that group of 6 is actually pretty good. And I thought of this last night. I've thought of this before. First of all, if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to raise your hands. You don't have to wait till the end. I hate the BCS. I hate the current system. I think it's terrible. In every NCAA sport, from rowing to field hockey to basketball, baseball, lacrosse, soccer, the goal is to have one clear, definitive champion, except in football. where we're going to have a whole bunch of debates and arguments, and I hate it. Here's what I would do, and this will take 2 minutes. A 12-team playoff. I like 12 better than 16 because 12, it becomes more of a premium to get in. It's a little harder to get in. And with 12, you can give the top 4 seeds a bye in the first round, make the other 8 play for the right to play you. The 12 teams that would get in, you'd get in your 5 conference champions, the SEC, the Big 12, the Pac-12, the ACC, and the Big 10. Then you would keep 2 bids for what do they call that? The qualifying conferences. You keep 2 bids aside no matter where they are, the 2 best in the BCS standings, and then you take 5 at large based on the BCS standings. That's 12 teams. You give 4 teams the bye in the first round. Then in that first round, 5 plays 12. First of all, the first argument you get is it adds too many games to the schedule. You have teams playing too many games. Next year, when you go to a 14 playoff, if you play a 12-game regular season and a conference championship and 2 games, that's 15 games. What I would say, bring the regular season back to 11, play the conference championship. The most that anybody can play would be 15. And you're already at 15 anyway, so that argument's no good. If you did it this year based on what I said, you'd have Alabama in from the SEC, Kansas State from the Big 12, Stanford from the Pac-12, Florida State from the ACC, Wisconsin from the Big 10. And it's a little weird with the Big 10 because Ohio State ran the table ineligible. Your 2 non-conference qualifiers would be Northern Illinois at 15 and Boise State at 19. And then your 5 at-larges this year would be Notre Dame at 1, Florida at 3, Oregon at 4, Georgia at 7, and LSU at 8. And that would be your 12 teams that would get in. So in the first round, hypothetically, when you reseeded, LSU would play Florida State with the winner getting a shot at Notre Dame. Anyway, it's not going to happen anytime soon. The fact that they don't, to me, is ridiculous. If you talk about money, can you imagine the money that those 11 games would bring in? You could rotate among the cities that are already involved, so you could keep New Orleans and Miami and Pasadena and Phoenix happy, giving them semifinal games or rotating them in the quarterfinals and in the finals. Anyway, it's a system that is not happening now. I'm hoping by the time they finish the 4-team playoff, you can get to that. I don't see any great hope for it anytime soon. All right, we're supposed to talk about Saints. 2 things. My friend Scott, who I grew up with, our dads were both original season ticket holders. So as kids, every year by this time of the year, you're eliminated. There's nothing really to pull for except for draft picks. So what Scott's rule always was, I just want to care by December. That's it. I just want to still care. In theory, the Saints are still alive in the playoff race. Now, I ran the numbers. The game that killed them yesterday was Seattle winning. Seattle loses in Chicago yesterday, and the Saints are still right in the middle of it. Now you need a lot more help. There's actually 7 teams going for the last spot. 6 of them are going to take care of themselves, or the Saints would take care of them in theory if they win out. The one you have to worry about, the one that's probably going to get in, would be Seattle. They're 7-5. They would have to lose 2 of the last 4, and then the Saints would have to win out. Seattle still has San Francisco, which is the losable game, but then beyond that, they have Arizona at home, at Buffalo, and St. Louis at home. In theory, they win 3 out of those 4, and the Saints cannot get in no matter what. In theory, if they lose 2 and the Saints win out, the Saints have 2 losses out of conference, they could get there. The biggest question right now, the biggest mystery among people, questions that I get about the Saints is, what's the deal with Drew Brees? 5 interceptions this week, clearly his worst performance as a professional quarterback. If you look at his numbers, he's had 2 spectacular years at quarterback. That was the 2009 Super Bowl year, and last year his quarterback rating 109, 110, which is almost mathematically impossible, but he did it twice. This year he's at 92.1. He's the 12th best quarterback in the NFL, which is about where he's been. The one most common argument you get, and everybody's got their own theory about what's going wrong, is that he signed the $1 million contract, or the $100 million contract, and he's complacent. That's not his personality. I don't believe that's it. There's a question about his age, but he's 33 in theory as a quarterback. He sure doesn't seem to have less zip on the ball. He doesn't seem to be less elusive. I don't think that's it. To me, the only answer, the only thing that makes sense is that he doesn't have Sean Payton and Sean Payton's influence. There's no question when you go to the Saints facility who the alpha dog in the room is. It's Sean Payton. Sean Payton is the brainchild, and every decision begins with him and everything that's gone wrong. It's also been one of those years where Darren Sproles drops a third down pass against Green Bay on the final drive. Darren Sproles never drops passes. He doesn't drop that pass, you win at Green Bay. Worst call of the year, the pass interference against Roman Harper in week 1 on a 4th down in the end zone against Washington. Instead, Washington gets a touchdown. If they don't call the pass interference, which the replacement officials shouldn't have, the Saints get the ball. It's a whole different game. This season could have been so different by this much, even without Sean Payton. I have no explanation for why things have clearly taken such a step back, except that they don't have the alpha dog. And clearly, the in-game adjustments, Sean Payton is the best there is. After the Kansas City game, I asked Drew Brees at the podium, I said, what do you do about in-game adjustments without Sean Payton? Because it sure seems like this team isn't making them the way they should. And he kind of smiled and he said, look, Sean Payton's the best at that. We're just going to have to figure a way. And unfortunately, as this team was sort of figuring out how to do that, they lost the first 3 games terribly. The loss at Green Bay was not a horrible loss. You lose at Atlanta, the team that's going to be the home field. That's not a horrible loss. You lose to San Francisco, a legitimate Super Bowl contender. That's not a horrible loss. The ones that are horrible are those first 3. There's no excuse for that. And you go back from the beginning with Sean Payton, and I think those 3 are completely different. Anyway, thanks for listening to me. Sorry about rambling about the BCS. It drives me nuts every year. Last year, people are arguing about Oklahoma State should have been there, who should be. I hate that. They don't have that argument in rowing or field hockey or gymnastics. They shouldn't have that argument in football. It doesn't make any logical sense that in your biggest money sport, you argue about the one thing that you should have no argument about. Anyway, what's that? Or in any other division of football. Correct. The NAIA has a playoff. In every other division of football but that one.
Yeah, Doug, considering your brother Martin alum, what about your fellow brother Martin alum, Mr. Tom Benson, dropping $10 million on your alma mater a couple of weeks ago? And following that up with Tulane, Tulane moving to the Big East, and Benson's $7.5 million donation to Tulane. How do you think Tulane has progressed over the last couple of months, along with Curtis Johnson?
Well, I like Curtis Johnson, and I think Curtis Johnson's going to be successful. And the one thing that I like about Curtis Johnson, the thing that he said right off the bat, and he's not afraid to say it. So many Tulane coaches have been afraid to say this. He believes he can win in New Orleans with guys that LSU is not recruiting. That there's so much talent in Louisiana that even if, now he will also say he believes he can compete for some of the top level kids, but he also believes that in Louisiana our talent is so good that he can win with the talent in New Orleans that LSU hasn't picked over. I mean, it's funny. I did a high school football game, play-by-play, of an O. Perry Walker game. And my house got destroyed by Isaac, so I've been cleaning up. I actually found my wedding ring. I had lost it like 10 years ago, but in cleaning up my house, I found my wedding ring. I found a roster from the O. Perry Walker game that I did. Number 1 on O. Perry Walker's roster was Burnell Wallace. And I scratched out Burnell and wrote in Mike because he was going by Mike. Plays for the Steelers now, was a kid that wasn't a high recruit. As fast as anybody in the NFL, there is so much talent in the New Orleans area, and I think Curtis Johnson understands that. I think he's going to be enormously successful in 2 or 3 years simply because he understands the talent base and how to get it. And I think kids are going to love playing for him. He is infectious as a personality. Obviously, 2-10, they're not happy with the record. I think Tulane's going to be enormously successful under Curtis. I think the Big East is a good move for them. They really didn't have a choice. It is Conference USA reborn, called the Big East now. I think it's a good conference for him, and I absolutely think he's going to win. Anyway, thanks for listening to me ramble.